Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your guide as we explore the world of landscape photography through the eyes and lenses of photographers, both up and coming and seasoned professionals. I like to dig a little deeper into the way they think about their photography, how it fits in their lives and where they see it going into the future. Timothy Poulton's path to landscape photography wound through graphic design, print marketing, and a serious motorsport career that ended when the passion ran out. A cherry blossom shoot in Tokyo in 2007 pointed him in a new direction, and he hasn't looked back. Best known in Australia for his Photoshop and post-processing courses, Timothy has built a reputation for helping photographers master complex digital workflows and prepare work confidently for print, competition and publication. His iconic Shocking Bondi image won the International Aperture Awards in 2011, and his courses regularly sell out. In this episode, Timothy talks about building and eventually scaling back an international touring operation running up to 14 tours a year, the competitive realities and online negativity that come with a visible profile in the industry, and what he actually defines as success. His fast Photoshop-based editing workflow and thoughts on photography's future amid phone cameras and AI are worth hearing too. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Tim. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Very good, Grant. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show. I wanted to talk to you about a number of things, but let's start with why you're a photographer. Why is Tim Poulton a photographer, and why do you love landscape so much?
I suppose it really kind of started for me as more as an outdoors hiking, camping, that sort of vibe. The photography was just something that I'd sort of dabbled with in my business, which I was running at the time. It was a graphic design print marketing business.
Yeah.
And we looked after our clients like Primo Small Goods, Ministry of Sound, Nokia, a whole bunch of big companies, and they from time to time needed photography. So we had a photography suite set up in our office in Chippendale. We had this cool kind of open plan warehouse. So photography was something that I was always involved in. Not that I was doing most of the photography day to day, but we did things like we had our own dark room, so we processed film and for printing, and we had one of the first Kodak digital backs that we had on a Hasselblad system.
Okay.
So I was always into the photography side of things, and I was always into the hiking and the design and being a creative. So falling into photography was pretty easy. But when I started, there was guys like Ken Duncan. They were using the Linhofts and the Fujifilm and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so when I got into it, there really wasn't any sort of digital cameras around. There was, as I said, there was the digital backs that you could put on the standard film cameras,
Yep.
but the DSLRs and iPhones and all that jazz that we use now wasn't around back then. So I started off with a Linhof and shooting around, New South Wales in my area where I lived. Got to meet a few guys that were in the industry. It's really interesting actually, because you go to these places now and you might find 10, 15, 20 photographers.
Yep.
Back 15, 20 years ago, you were lucky if you would see another photographer.
Yeah.
So it's interesting the way I got into it, because at the time I was still running my design print business and I was racing cars. I was racing in the Australian GT Championship, and that was my passion. That was my life, and it was a really cool industry to be involved in. It's very competitive, but there was a lot of going away for weekends and you had your racing, and there was lots of friends, and it was a really cool kind of festival type atmosphere, and you made so many good friends out of it. It was
Sure.
expensive, but the buzz you got from racing cars was phenomenal. And I've always, ever since I was young, when I used to race BMX and motocross, I've always enjoyed that sensation, or that feeling that you get when you're so focused on something that everything else disappears. So whatever problems you've got going on in your life, or issues, or whatever, when you put the helmet on, or you look through the eyepiece of your camera, whatever it is you're passionate about, you just completely forget about all those worries and all those problems.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of chased that throughout my life, and motorsport was probably the pinnacle. You slide the helmet on, the red mist comes down, and all of a sudden it's just you in the car and a bunch of other lunatics on the racetrack. But I certainly enjoyed and loved that feeling that you got from it.
Yeah. When did you finish up racing?
So I won the championship in 2018, and it kind of, and we were doing really well. I was racing, my teammate was Stig Richards. Believe it or not, his actual name was Stig.
Yeah.
And I'd met him through my design marketing business, and we were really close friends. And he was into racing cars, and I was into racing cars, and he had lots of contacts. He got a sponsorship with Bundaberg Rum. And to get Bundy Rum for an independent driver and car and series was a pretty big thing.
Yeah, definitely.
We won the championship in 2018, and then after that, it's motorsports, the sort of business where you're always chasing more performance, you're always chasing more speed, and unfortunately that costs money. It's not just talent, it's money, and you're either buying faster cars or you're upgrading cars to go for.
Yeah, and it's not go-kart money either.
No, it's definitely not. I won't go into figures, but it was certainly a significant amount that we were spending every year. But look, we were getting sponsorship, so it kind of worked out pretty well. But I just found that I lost the passion for it, and because of that, and it was all because of the politics and all the drama and stuff that goes on with everything you get involved in life. There's always some sort of politics. There's always some sort of drama.
Absolutely.
And I just thought, I'm throwing money down the drain here. I don't really want to be doing this anymore.
Yeah.
So the transition was actually pretty cool, because my brother was living in Japan, and he was just getting into photography himself. And we were chatting with each other, and he was telling me how exciting it was to photograph the cherry blossom and all the beautiful torii gates and all that sort of stuff in Japan. So I thought, okay, I'm going to grab myself a camera, and I got one of the first DSLRs that were out from Nikon. I'd already dabbled in the film photography with the Linhof, and I think I had a Fuji film there for a little bit as well, but I really wasn't taking it that seriously. And because we were racing around the country, we would go to places like Phillip Island, we'd go over to Perth, Queensland Raceway, Tasmania, all these beautiful places. And so I got to, when I wasn't practicing or racing or whatever, I would go and do a hike, or we'd go for a drive and, do a sunrise or a sunset, and really found the passion for it. And I suppose there was that transition from, once I finished racing cars, my design print business, because of the internet and, a bunch of other things, the whole graphic design and marketing industry was becoming very difficult to make a profit out of. So I saw an opportunity to not only become a photographer, but the opportunity to teach people how to take photos, to teach people how to edit photos, and run tours and sell photography gear and what have you. And I suppose I had an unfair advantage because I was already a photographer. I was already a outdoors hiking person, but I was also a graphic designer. I'd been using Photoshop since the day was first released.
Right.
So having that skill as a photographer, as a graphic designer and editor who knows how to use Photoshop, it came to me very easily to be able to take photos and edit them. And I also had that experience in the marketing and internet industry, as you know, it was quite new and fresh at the time.
Yeah.
So I suppose I already had that skill and that experience in all the facets of photography, and landscape photography was the I suppose it was the genre or the style or the theme that I wanted to chase, because I loved the hiking part of it, and I loved camping and being up in the mountains and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much how it started. What happened from there is another quite a lot of big stories to where I am now.
Well, we might as well get into some of that. I guess once you'd sort of finished up racing, you mentioned the transition into photography was easy based on the other aspects of your business that you ran. Where did the professional side of photography actually sort of start to take over a little bit from the other side of things, or did it?
It definitely did. So I was shooting in places, mostly I was shooting around Australia, but I was shooting mostly in New South Wales. And
Yep.
one of the very popular spots is the Narrabeen tidal pool and the Mona Vale tidal pool. You know, New South Wales is famous for its tidal pools, so, and seascapes. So, you know, and that's where the sunrises, because we're on the East Coast, we don't really get great sunsets. They're all sunrises, and I'm a morning person. I like getting up early anyway, so it kind of all made sense and fell into place for me. And I was at the Narrabeen tidal pool, and there was this other photographer out there, a really cool guy called Jeff Smith,
Yep.
who was at the time. And this is when there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was none of those things around at the time. I don't even think the iPhone had been released yet. So
Yeah.
I think we were all at the time on Yahoo's Flickr.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And I met Jeff at the Narrabeen tidal pool, along with a bunch of other guys that were photographers as well. And Jeff and I just got on like a house on fire. Jeff's a Pom. He's from the UK and he's living in Australia. Really lovely, down to earth guy. And he was running this group called the New South Wales Seascapers. And at the time, I didn't really want to get involved with groups and do group events and group outings and stuff like that. For me, it was more about getting away from things in life and getting out there in nature and at sunrise and enjoying the moment, rather than being involved with all these people. But like most things in life, if you're passionate about something and you're good at it, people gravitate towards you and you gravitate towards them. So it's just something that evolves and happens. So Jeff kept saying to me, "Oh, I really want you to meet a bunch of these guys in this group." And I resisted for a long time. And then I finally said yes, and I met Jeff and a group of other guys at the Cathedral Rock down in Kiama.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I met a bunch of guys. So I met Aaron Pryor, there was Dex, and John Armitage. And we went and did sunrise. We went and had breakfast afterwards. And John and I, both being into marketing, and John was doing his thing and I was doing my thing, we basically created the Focus Photography Group on that morning. And Jeff and Aaron were involved, but eventually, and Dex were involved as well. But eventually, Jeff wanted to kind of focus on his family, and sort of he didn't get involved in it. And Aaron was I think he was living in Port Macquarie at the time, so he didn't want to be involved either. So this whole Focus Photography group just exploded. It was incredible. Within a year, we'd go from being two or three of us at a shoot to, I remember there was once we were down at Whale Beach and there was 50 people at this meetup. It was crazy. And it became quite an obsession for John and myself. and we started the Focus Photography Awards. And at the same time, I saw an opportunity to, run a few little tours here and there. So I ended up running a tour from Cairns down to Brisbane. I did one in Tasmania. I did one over in Perth, and it kind of you get swept up in it, and it just sort of takes over.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, John and I didn't really see eye to eye on a bunch of things with the group. And look, I'm not going to get into the nasty details or what happened, but it didn't end well, unfortunately. But it created an opportunity for me to start the one of a kind photography group. And that's when I met people like Tim Donnelly, Nell Sinclair, all these up and coming, fabulous, very talented photographers in Australia. And I got them all together, and we created this one of a kind photography group, which became a very successful photography group in its day. And, I then got quite bored with shooting in Australia, as you do, and I wanted to travel. So I decided to put a calendar out of, I think it was 8. I think the first year that I did it, I think it was 8 tours, and put them up on Facebook and Flickr, and at the time, because we had a Facebook group, and we sold it out. We sold out these tours in a week. It was bonkers. It was nuts how successful it was. So instantly I'm like, oh, wow, this is a great business model here. And there was hardly anybody running workshops or tours or anything like that at the time.
Yeah, internationally in particular.
Yeah, definitely. And we did places like Patagonia, and we went to Japan, and we did Canada and the US and Norway and Iceland, and just all over the show. It was just on an absolute tear, just traveling around the world, just trying to see as much as we could. And you could see that everybody that was involved in it and anyone that came on the tour was just as obsessed as I was. And there was no one, everyone had their bucket list, and that bucket list needed to be ticked off. There was a period there for probably 5 to 6 years where I was running anything from 10 to 14 tours a year. It was ridiculous. Wow. And it was exhausting. It took its toll, you know what I mean? Not only on me physically, but mentally, but my family and all sorts of stuff. But that's my story.
So how did you sort of start to think about that business side of things in terms of getting better balance? It's one of the things that I always bring up with the professionals that I'm talking to on the podcast, in terms of you've got lots of things on the go, plus most of us have families or, other relationships in our lives that we've got to balance out with all of this. You mentioned there that sort of sounds like there was a little bit of imbalance. How did you get things back into balance? Did you get back into balance?
I didn't have a choice, to be honest with you. I suppose I'm the sort of person that is very obsessive about something, whether it's racing cars or running my graphic design business or photography or writing music or whatever. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to put my heart and soul into it, and I can't help it. I can't do it any other way. That's just the way I've been my whole life, and that's probably the way I'll be forever. But everything has a shelf life for me anyway. And I'd done the racing cars. I used to put on raves, illegal dance parties back in the 90s. And I've got some old ex-raver friends who are still doing it. They still have their turntables. They still mix records. They might dabble and take a few pills on the weekend every now and then. It's like, and I say to them, I can't believe you're still doing that. 25 years later, like, seriously? To me, it's just the concept of doing the one same thing for my entire life. I just can't fathom that. I want to experience lots of different things in my life. So I have a shelf life with things. I do come back to things. Like I was into music when I was in my teens and my 20s, and that was my passion. And I went away from that for 20 plus years, and now I'm back into it again, running the Rotate Sound label and writing ridiculous amounts of music. I got the studio up here on my country property. I absolutely love writing tunes, but
Yeah.
there, to answer your question about the balance, I suppose and as I said, not to go into too much detail, but I didn't find the balance. It all came to a head, and massive changes have happened over the last sort of 10 years for me.
Yeah.
I'm and look, I'm in a much happier place because of that, but there were, like everything in life, there were some consequences that I had to deal with and other people had to deal with.
Yeah.
And I always went into this, and I always went in and got into the whole photography side of things because I love it. There's nothing I love more than, you know, scoping out a composition at a beautiful location with some stunning mountains in the background, and you've got the right conditions, and it's, you basically, the skill level of putting all of that together is high. So it's an exciting pursuit. And I'm not going to go into a location or photograph a location unless I give it absolutely everything and get the maximum out of it. And that can be tough because you can be really brutal on yourself and really hard on yourself. And I've seen a lot of photographers over the years really struggle with mental health and issues like that because they're too hard on themselves. And it can be a very tough industry, a tough business or a tough game or whatever you want to call it. And it's very competitive. It's probably the most bitchy industry I've ever been involved in.
Interesting. I've got to admit, I haven't found that, but then maybe I'm not mixing with some of the people you are. Maybe I don't know.
I think what it comes down to, Grant, is that there's only so much money to go around in this business.
Yeah,
And
I get what you mean in terms of a very competitive business. But I've found that many of the people, both that I've spoken to on the podcast, but I've come into contact with from a business perspective, they're more than happy to share resources and very happy to, I guess, be quite open and share their experiences, share their skills, quite freely. But I won't say that everybody's like that. I got to admit.
look, not to sound jaded, like don't get me
Sure,
wrong.
sure.
There are many wonderful people in this business, in this industry, and I've made some lifelong friendships out of this business. But I suppose when you start running workshops and tours and stuff around the world, you do come across a lot of, very competitive other businesses and other people who
Yeah, interesting.
it can be a little bit dodgy in the way they deal with competition. Not everyone. I find that, and look, I'm probably going to get into trouble for saying this, but I've always found and I've always said that a lot of photographers who have absolutely no social skills whatsoever and no logistical skills or business skills or entrepreneurial skills at all, they can take a great photo, but they're absolutely garbage at running workshops and tours. Think they can run this business because they've seen other people do it and other people being successful
Sure,
at it. And they're
sure.
like, oh, I can take a great photo, so I can run a tour for 10, 12, 15 people. I think they sort of miss how difficult the logistics and of running a tour for a group of people, and the dynamic, and I suppose managing people's expectations on these trips and on these tours.
Yeah, yeah. The thing I've sort of found with, I definitely hear what you're saying. The thing I've found with other people I've run into when running a workshop myself, that said, I haven't been running international ones. I haven't been thinking about that side of things. But most of the people I've run into so far have been fairly reasonable, I guess, No,
Yeah.
nobody's, you might end up at the same location as somebody running another workshop. It might be Bombo Quarry or whatever. But I always think of things in terms of, well, this place is there. I've got no right to claim it as my own just because I happen to book something there. And if somebody else has booked something there at the same time, well, we'll just get on with it and make sure that our clients get the best experience they can get, because I don't think it would be a very pleasant experience for anyone to see two people going at it in front of their clients.
No, well, that's the thing. Like,
Uh,
if you meet up with these people in person, everyone's nice as pie.
yeah, yeah,
It's behind the scenes and the keyboard warriors and the
yeah,
editing and the dodgy things that people do. Like, I don't know if you ever remember, but there's a absolute brilliant legend photographer, Mark Adamus from the
yep,
US. Back in the day, there was a guy or a group of people going around who were absolutely sledging Mark for a very long time.
wow, yeah,
Um, and that was massive. This guy actually created a blog and a website that exposed Mark and all these other photographers as creating fake photography or faking their photography.
yeah,
And yeah, you look back on that and just think, how do these things happen? But there's
yeah, wow.
plenty of instances in the last, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, where I've had some seriously nasty people do some nasty things online, and it just kind of takes the joy out of it,
Oh,
Like,
definitely. Yeah. I think that's one of the issues with social media is, as you say, the keyboard warriors having a crack. I guess I think myself fairly lucky. I haven't experienced too much of that. There's
mm,
always some of it, but I tend to just insta block, and I just try to put it out of my mind. But it is very, very difficult. It does jade your thinking and have yourself second guessing yourself, I think.
yeah, exactly. And look, I think if I could give anyone starting in photography any advice, spend maybe 1% of your life or your photography career on the social media side of things and 99% on the photography. And just like,
Yeah.
I know it's a necessary evil, especially because what's the point of taking photos and if no one's going to see them? It's like, what's the point of writing music if no one's going to hear it? What's
Yeah.
the point of writing a book if no one's going to read it? Like, I get these people saying, oh, why do you bother with the social media side of things? It's like, I don't do the gallery thing anymore. So I don't really do that many prints anymore. The whole print magazine thing's dead and buried. So
Yeah.
how else is people going to see your work? So it's social media and that's about it, really. Like, how
Yeah.
else do you
I
get
mean, unless
your
unless you can drag them to your website somehow,
well, look, we all have websites, but
Well, it's like anything, and you know yourself as a marketer, you've got to have people aware that you exist in the first place to even have them start looking for you.
yeah, exactly. But the thing is, why would anybody bother when it's all just at their fingertips on Instagram? Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I think the whole web industry is on its last legs anyway. I can't see that hanging around for much longer.
yeah,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, so like I look at the websites that I've created over the years, and the traffic that they would get 10 years ago as opposed to now is unbelievable how much they've dropped off. And it's not
Yeah,
because that that website's not popular anymore. It's just people just don't use the web for that. They don't go to websites and spend time on websites. They spend their time on Instagram,
yeah.
TikTok, not even Facebook anymore. Like, who even bothers with Facebook anymore?
Yeah, I agree. I keep wondering why I do as well sometimes, but yeah,
Well, we're old school, Grant. You know what I mean?
that's
Like,
it.
the young kids don't do it anymore, but we certainly do.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about locations and place. You talked a little bit about New South Wales and the coast, and they're places that I'm very familiar with.
Yep.
Do you have a place that's really special to your heart that you keep being drawn back to?
I'll be honest with you, Grant. It's been a long time since I've actually gone out and taken a photo in Australia.
Really?
I was recently over in Perth and went to a few of the locations that I used to get excited about. And look, don't get me wrong, some of the seascapes are absolutely gorgeous in WA in Perth. And, we've got some of the most beautiful scenery in the world in Australia, like Cradle Mountain is just absolutely stunning. And, some of I love Bermagui and I love Horsehead Rock and
Yep.
all these sorts of places, you know what I mean? You've got Crescent Head just down the road from where I am. But unfortunately, once you start going to places like, the Canadian Rockies, you go to Norway or you go to Patagonia, when you come back home, you just find it really hard to get motivated to go out and shoot in Australia. And I suppose, if you're doing 6 to 8 or 10 tours a year, you're exhausted by the time you come home anyway. So
Yeah, the energy's not there.
no, and yeah, that's just my honest take. I just don't really get excited about shooting in Australia anymore. If someone said to me, "Let's go to Tasmania and hike in Cradle Mountain," I would jump at the chance. Or if a mate of mine, Tim Donnelly or Scott Buttigieg or whatever, rang me up and said, "Let's go to North Ram's Head, let's go to Kosciuszko and hike around there," I'd be there in a heartbeat. But I think after I'm getting close. I think it's like 17 years now. I've been traveling around and taking photos around the world. It's as I said, it's taken its toll. So, and I'm kind of transitioning more into writing music and running my label and
Interesting. Okay.
looking after my country property and what
Yeah.
have you.
So doing less photography is kind of where you're going in the future?
Look, I have got a bunch of private tours that I'm running next year. I'm not doing the public stuff anymore.
Yep.
So I organise either group tours for people, or they come to me and say, "Oh, look, we'd really love to do this location. You're the man that's been there a million times. Blah blah blah. Can you organise a tour for me?" And I talk to my people over there and make sure that we're all legit and we've got what we need to be able to do it, and away we go. But next year I think I've got a total of 4 tours. Whereas this year I did, I did Japan, I did Patagonia. I'm doing, Patagonia I think 2 or 3 times. I'm heading to Dubai, Iceland, Norway, Switzerland. Just got back from Namibia, as I said. So yes, to answer your question, I am slow, pulling it back and slowing it down a bit. But
Yeah.
I'm also the sort of person that gets bored and gets itchy feet pretty quick. So hey, ask me tomorrow and I might say, "Oh yeah, I've got a bunch of these tours that I'm doing anyway." So yeah, it's
Fair enough. Fair enough. That brings me to the topic of motivation and staying motivated. How do you sort of keep your motivation going? You say you come back from a tour and you're exhausted. How do you pick yourself up for the next one that you've got to do in a month or whatever after the one that you've just finished?
Look, about nearly 5 years ago now, I bought 560 acres up in the hinterlands in New South Wales. Absolutely gorgeous bit of property,
Nice.
but it is very remote. It's on solar. You know what I mean? I got septic tanks. I've got rain, tank water.
Yep.
It's you basically drive up my road, you close the gate, and you can pretty much disappear. And for me, it's a wonderful recovery and wonderful therapy to come away. Like some of the tours you do are absolutely brilliant. Like Namibia, fantastic. The people that were on that tour were brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just did a private trip with a mate of mine, Steve, from New Zealand. We just went and did Patagonia together, and that was brilliant. But then, and look, I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but there was some tours last year where I just wanted to chew my arm off, or just, I just want it out so badly.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you book these tours and you commit to these tours, and you have to be the one that motivates them. You have to be motivated every day. There
Yeah.
is no, I'm not going to get up tomorrow
Yeah, I'm not
morning.
interested in
I'm not
sunrises.
into it. You know what I mean? Like, suck it up, princess. Like, make a double, triple shot coffee and get your ass in the van. Like,
Yeah.
there is no, how do I motivate myself? It's just that's what you do. That's what people are paying you for. They're paying you to motivate them.
Yeah.
Because most of the people that go on workshops and tours, they won't do it themselves. They need a group of people to push them along and to get them up in the morning and to get them out there. Or they're there because they want to learn. You have to be professional about it, and you have to be excited and happy and motivated. Inside, you're probably not. You're probably like, oh man, I just want to roll over and have a little snooze. But you can't do that. But coming here, getting away from it, and I live like a hermit up here on my own, so it doesn't take long to get bored and to get excited about the next trip. And
Yeah.
I've always been a complete hyperactive lunatic my whole life anyway. So I don't really need motivating, to be honest, Grant.
Fair enough. I guess one of the things that I ask everyone is how they define success in their photography. What is success to you?
I'll go back to what I was saying at the beginning, where when you're doing something and you are so immersed in it and you're so excited, everything falls away. Like, it's just you, the camera, and the scene. And to me, I don't judge success by how much money I've got, or how many possessions I have, or how many awards I've got, or any of that. That's all just noise. It's all just garbage to me. We wake up each day with an opportunity to do something special. All of us, every single one of us.
Yeah.
And I'm never one to, although we do tend to have a little cry and a little whinge and that throughout life, and you just get the little violin out and no one cares, right? But
Yep.
for me, I judge my success on that buzz and that exciting feeling that I get from capturing a beautiful scene. To me, that's the success. That's the juice. That's what I'm chasing. That's what I'm after.
Is it something more than just creating nice images? Is there some kind of feeling or emotion that you're trying to capture in your image?
I think the problem and the issue that we're faced with now is everything's becoming a throwaway. Like, everyone's an award-winning photographer. Like,
Yeah.
I remember back in the day when I just started photography, I was working for one of my customers was Ravisi's Hotel on Bondi Beach. And Brendan got me down there to do some photography. And I was on my way back to the car with all my gear, and you could see this massive thunderstorm coming in over the heads of Ben Buckler. And I was almost at the car, and I was up on the ridge, and there was this homeless guy sitting on a park bench, and he had the classic paper bag, and he was drinking. And as I was walking past, I had my tripod and camera and all the gear, and he said to me, he goes, "Oh, that'd take a good picture." And I stopped and looked at him, and I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And I said to him, I said, "Oh, what did you say?" And he pointed out over the heads. And as he did that, a huge lightning bolt came out of this massive storm that was coming in.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, wow, he's right. So I set my gear up. He comes over, stands beside me. Didn't smell so good, but that's okay. We were excited. We were into the scene. And I set my camera up, and I exposed, it was quite dark, and I did a 5-minute exposure. And during that time, there was a whole bunch of lightning strikes coming in over the heads.
Yeah.
And that's how I created the scene Shocking Bondi, which I entered into the International Aperture Awards and won.
Yep.
And I won the award. And, I got $5,000 US and tons of press, and
it was a big deal back then, but now, like they give awards away like lollies, like everyone's getting awards all over the place. They've just watered it down and taken any credibility or any prestige out of it.
Yeah.
So photography is not just about taking a picture. It's about conquering something, conquering the conditions, conquering the composition, conquering the hike or the mountain or camping. Like back in the day, I remember Tim and we would camp up at North Ramshead in the middle of winter,
Yep.
absolute blizzards coming through, freezing cold, just to wake up to capture those tours in the morning. I suppose it's kind of spiritual, you know what I mean?
Sure.
That's, to me, it's not just taking a beautiful picture. It's so much more than that. And sharing that moment with like-minded people, that's what it's about. It was always about and always will be about for me.
That brings me to the question of where things don't go quite as planned. Are there any times where you've been deep in the field, something's gone wrong, but something unforgettable still happened?
Well, a classic one, talking about North Ramshead. I was running a photography tour, not a workshop, so I wasn't teaching anybody. We was just a group of blokes who wanted to go and hike up into the mountains and capture South and North Ramshead. And we probably were a little bit reckless in our our decision on what we did, but we hiked up to South Ramshead, and it was. We didn't have snowshoes. We had the right gear, we had our tents and sleeping bags and thermarests and cooking gear and camera gear and all that stuff, but we didn't have the big platform snowshoes. And unfortunately, we underestimated the depth and the level of the snow, but we were relentless. We were not going to give up. So what would normally take 3 hours, I think took us 7 hours to get to this spot. And when we finally got there, when you camp in the snow, if you've got a bivvy or a tent, what you do is you dig yourself a hole or a little grave, and you set your tent up in the hole. Everyone had got set up and it was getting dark, and we did dinner. And unfortunately for me, I made some errors. I popped my thermarest, so I didn't have anything to sleep on, and I packed my summer bag as opposed to my winter bag. So I had a horrific night in the tent, and like absolutely freezing. I think I probably got maybe an hour's sleep at the end, and I was dozing off, and I was dreaming of horses for some reason, because you've got the wild brumbies up in the snow gums and that. And I finally wake up just like shivering in my sleeping bag, and I'm thinking, I can still hear these horses. And so I open up my tent, and there was a group of about 10 of them. They would have been maybe 15, 20 meters away from my tent, just like rolling around in the snow. And it was one of the most incredible scenes I've ever seen in my life. It blew my mind. And, by the time I scrambled to find my camera bag and my tripod and all the rest of it, the horses had run away. So I'd missed the shot. But it was an experience that I will never forget.
Yeah. What about actual horror stories? Has anything really badly gone wrong and you've almost come a cropper?
No, myself, like I keep myself pretty fit. I do a lot of stretching exercises every morning. So I've got like a bit of a regime that I do. I don't do it every morning, but most mornings I'll spend 15, 20 minutes doing a whole bunch of stretches. I find that if you keep fit and you keep agile, there's less chance of things going wrong. There's been some moments where people have underestimated or overestimated their ability. And I'm not going to name names, of course, but there was one time where we were up at North Ramshead, and one of the participants decided, I remember we set up, I got given, I was sponsored by Sierra Designs, this tent company for a while. They did sleeping bags and all the rest of it. And they send me these two, what they call teepee tents, right?
Yep.
And it's basically a big tent with no floor. You set this teepee tent up and you put snow around these flaps around the edge, and you get inside and you can sleep 8 people in it. I remember we got all set up, and this one guy got in there and he looked at me and he's like, "Where do we sleep?" And I just laughed, and I just said to him, I just said, "We sleep on there, the snow." And he's like, "But there's no floor." And I'm like, "Trust me, a micro layer of tent isn't going to protect you from the snow." So we tried to get to sleep, but he just couldn't do it. And I ended up having to hike him back down in the dark.
Oh, wow.
And drive him back to the hotel, and then drive all the way back to the campsite, and then hike all the way back up again to get back there for sunrise.
Wow.
But for horrific stories, I've never had anyone get injured. I've kicked some people off trips and tours and what have you, but
Okay.
I've never had anyone get injured or hurt or upset or anything like that. So no, I'm sorry, I don't have a horror story.
Kicking someone off a trip, that's got to be fairly drastic, I guess. Obviously don't want to know too many details, but I'm interested in that. It's the first time it's ever come up on the podcast.
Look, if someone's being abusive towards somebody else, whether
Oh,
that's
absolutely. Yeah.
whether that's a physical or emotional, I give them an opportunity to stop what they're doing, and if they don't, then that's it. It's curtains. You're off. And look, they don't like it, and they get pretty upset about it. But
Yeah.
as I said, not going into any details, but we're there to have fun. We're there to have a good time and look after each other and help each other and teach each other. That's the thing with these trips. When you do workshops, you not only learn from the tour leader, but you also learn from everybody else.
Yeah.
And some of just on the trip I just did with Namibia, a good friend of mine, Mark Sinclair from Texas, from the US, he was fabulous with teaching people. He's a fabulous photographer, and he's very generous with his time, and he's more than happy to teach people. It's amazing how many people that have done trips with me that end up doing multiple trips. I've got a couple of people who have done 20 plus trips over the years. So you build this community and these friendships, and they keep coming back for more because I suppose it's a known quantity. They know what they're going to get,
Yeah.
and they're comfortable in that environment. One story though, I'll tell you. I was in Patagonia, and I was doing 2 trips, and I remember a good mate of mine, Scott. We had clear skies pretty much every day.
Yeah.
We very little cloud, which is unusual for Patagonia. And I remember Scott having a bit of a whinge about it. And we laugh about it today, because the second one I did, it rained for 11 days out of the,
Oh, wow.
I think it was the 12, 13 days. And I remember waking up one morning, opening my tent, and I pretty much it was like a waterfront. I pretty much was surrounded by water at this campsite, and it was absolutely horrific. Like spending that sort of amount of time in a tent in the rain, soaking wet most of the time, knowing you're not going to get a great photo because the weather won't clear, can be brutal, absolutely brutal.
The other question a lot of people ask is how people go about their processing. You mentioned that your background with the creative industry prior to getting into photography helped you a lot.
Yep.
I'm keen to understand, pardon me, I'm keen to understand the process that you go through when looking at an image and deciding what to do. And are you straight into your editing, or do you leave things for a while after you get back from a trip? What's your process look like?
Look, I suppose it really depends on the calendar for the year.
Yeah.
Like there might be a time where I'll do 4 or 5 trips in a row, And, I take my computer with me. So occasionally, if I've got some downtime, if the weather's not great or I've got a break between trips, I'll set the computer up and bang out some edits. There's no real set formula on when I do my edits. I've still got stuff that's from last year that I haven't looked at.
Yeah, right.
But when I'm taking the photo and I know it's good, that is burnt into my memory. That particular shot, that particular scene at that particular moment. So I can shoot for a month, and there might be 5 or 6 absolute epic moments in that month. Maybe less, maybe more. But I always say to people, if I come away with an absolute banger, something that would grace my walls on a trip. If I just come away with one absolute banger, I am totally satisfied and happy.
Yeah, no.
Because it's not about collecting amazing photos. There's more to it than that. It's the experience of traveling, the locations, the hiking, the accommodation, the people, the food, the coffee, just that whole, I love to, when I go to a place, I love to set up in one spot, like book 3 or 4 nights in one spot and go back to places over and over and over again. The same
right.
place. I haven't got a problem with going to the same location 10 times in a row. I'm not one of these photographers that constantly has to be ticking off those Instagram moments where, okay, I've done that, I'm never going to go back again. Like I love going back to a spot over and over again. But I suppose my processing, as I said, I already know that there's a banger on that card or on the camera, and I once I get to that, I don't do a lot of editing, to be honest with you, Grant, and that's because I've spent probably the best part of 25 years being a graphic designer and using Photoshop from day dot. From when the first version of Photoshop came out and the first Mac came out, I was into it, and that was an obsession that I've had since then to now. I'm still obsessed with Photoshop. I run Photoshop courses all over the place. So I've come up with a very fast process of processing my images, and it would be anything from 15 minutes to maybe half an hour on an image max.
Yeah.
I'm not one of these people that spends all night on just one image. And that's just because I've developed, I suppose I've developed my look and my feel and my style. So one thing I always tell photographers when you're first starting out is find a style that you become known for. Try not to jump around from different genres to, different styles, and that, stick with something that people are going to remember you by. And it gets to the point where people can look at an image and go, oh, that's that person's image, that's an Adamus image. I think that's how you build a fan base in photography.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking about fan bases, what do you see as photography's place in society? Where do you see it going?
It's an interesting question, like I think it's amazing how 15 years ago you could, as I was saying at the beginning of our conversation, you could go to these locations. Even now, like I did Patagonia, my first trip to Patagonia was 10 years ago.
Yep.
And, and you'd be lucky if you saw another photographer. Now you go there and they're just everywhere. There's just photographers all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's everywhere you go. Same like places like Iceland and Japan. I was just in Japan this year doing the cherry blossom, and the cherry blossom's always been crazy and popular. But I suppose with the advent of mobile phones and really good cameras on these mobile phones, everyone's a photographer. Anyone can be a photographer. And so like sometimes I'll take a photo with my phone and there's no way I can capture that scene with a camera the way I capture it with my phone.
Right.
And I suppose because everyone's look at me, oh, selfie this, selfie that. I think the whole photography things, it's just going to keep exploding. And when you've got these companies like Apple and Samsung and Sony and Nikon and all the rest of it making ridiculous money out of these products, like you can imagine the money that Nikon are making now out of cameras as opposed to 15 years ago when they first released their first DSLR.
Yeah, exactly.
Bonkers. So I think it's always going to have its place. How these cameras evolve, I do hope that we get over the sensor size obsession. Having a good size sensor is great, but do we really need 100, 200, 300 megapixels? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it go down the path of more dynamic range. That would be something that would really excite me.
Yeah, I think you're quite right there. I recently moved to mirrorless.
Mm.
Well, I say recently, it was probably about 9, 10 months ago now. But in doing that, I had pretty much any choice. I could have changed systems. I could have done a number of things, but I chose the camera that I did. I could have gone more megapixels, but the reason I chose the one that I did was because I didn't see the point in having, 200, 300 megapixel images when I'm quite happy with around about that 20 to 30 mark, where you can get brilliant looking images. The quality is fantastic. The amount that you're able to capture is ideal. And I can still print to a reasonable size without having to stretch the budget from a hard disk space perspective. Because the issue with going up in terms of size, yes, quality might improve slightly because you're able to get more pixels per inch or whatever. But to be honest, that quality differential, I don't think is worth the additional hard disk space that you have to invest in it.
No, and that's the thing. The industry, and look, these companies do it because it's
Oh,
people.
it's an easy way of making money out of it.
Yeah, it's everyone wants to upgrade because they think they need a bigger sensor, but I would much prefer for them to announce inbuilt. Like I know some of the cameras already do it, like the Olympus has got it and stuff like that, but inbuilt filters and inbuilt grads and inbuilt better dynamic range. I know we get 13, 14 stops, but why can't we have double that? That would be something that would really excite me. I think, can we really go any faster than 120 frames per second? Do we need to go any faster than 120 frames per second? I don't think so.
Yeah, well, you're talking about taking a video then, basically.
Yeah, well, most videos frame rates are 24 frames
24
per
to
second.
35, yeah.
So, like who knows where it's going to go? I've never been brand loyal with any camera. I started with Nikon, but I've tried them all. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I've done. I'm shooting Sony at the moment, but I've tried the Has Fuji, even the Sigma, and all of them. I've tried them all basically, but I'm shooting with the Sony at the moment, and I love it.
Nice. What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's given you?
There was I don't think there's really been anyone in the photography industry that's ever given me any advice. I did get some advice from someone who was not involved in the industry. He's passed away now, but he was a very wealthy man. He had everything. He had like homes in Italy and Paris and New York, and really lovely, super intelligent guy. And I'd see him every now and then. And I remember he discovered that he had an illness, and I won't go into details, but
Sure.
it eventually took him. But he said to me, he said, if I could give you any advice, Tim, and I took it, and I basically lived it literally after that, because I was kind of struggling with what I wanted to do in my life at the time, because I was doing really well with my design print business. I was making good money out of that. And, I was buying lots of cars and buying this and buying that, just, speedboats and all the garbage. And I remember he said to me, he just said, if I could give you any advice, Tim, he said, don't spend your money on all this stuff. He said, spend your money on experiences with the people you love. That's the most important thing that you can do in life, is to, and look, it doesn't always work out that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, sure.
But for me, it's about experiencing as many things as I possibly can. And I'll go back to what I said about how, some people just end up doing the same thing for their whole life, forever. They never change. They never try anything new. I don't want to get to the end and go, I wish I did that. Or, why didn't I do that? I should have had a crack at that. That's probably the best bit of advice that I've ever been given. And I certainly would say that to anybody else. And my mum always used to say to me when I was growing up, look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and ask yourself the question, who was I yesterday? But most importantly, who am I going to be today?
Yeah.
And I always do that every morning. Makes me think of my mum as well. So
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
We need to think about wrapping up shortly. I've just got another couple of questions. Are there any other photographers that you think I need to be talking to on the podcast?
Wow. Have you spoken to Scott John, the aerial
I have,
photographer?
yes.
Yep. So you've had a chat with him?
I have, yeah.
What about Dylan Knight?
No, I don't think I've spoken to Dylan.
Okay,
I know his work, but yeah.
Yeah, he's look, I'll be honest with you, Grant, I've never been one of these photographers that looks at other people's work, and it's gotten me into trouble a few times in the past. A few people have said that I don't support the industry, or I don't support other photographers. I don't know, like I don't want to cloud, and that's probably the wrong term, but I don't want to cloud my vision of my photography and my journey and what I'm trying to do by looking at everybody else's images.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't want to be one of these, and there's so many of them out there. I've met so many photographers that are like that just scroll, looking at other people's work and basically going out on a mission, going to the location, capturing exactly that scene and ticking it off like it's a bucket list, I've never really, I wouldn't say I'm not inspired by other photographers. David Osborne's probably, I don't know if you'd be able to get him or not. He's a English photographer. His panoramics, British panoramics, are off the charts. His editing skills blow my mind. He's just so good.
Yeah. I'll give him a go and see if I can get hold of it.
Yeah, but yeah, mate, I'd say Dylan's definitely, and he's such a top guy, you know what I mean?
Yeah, nice. Thank you for that.
Nice.
My last question is one that I've been asking right from the beginning of the podcast, and it's an issue that many photographers have differences of opinion on. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I love Hawaiian, mate. Absolutely love Hawaiian pizza.
Awesome. Nice.
I make my own pizzas, actually. I make my own dough, so
very nice.
big fan of ham and pineapple pizza.
What sort of pizza oven you got? Have you built your own, or have you got a commercial one, or do you just stick them in the oven?
At the moment, at this point in my life, I just stick it in the oven. But
that's
back
fine.
when I was in Sydney and still with my family, we used to, on birthdays, we would get a commercial pizza oven brought in, and we'd make pizzas and stuff for all our guests and that. So I do like a good pizza, but I live the hermit lifestyle now, and I spend most of my time just writing music.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, Tim. It's been great getting to know you better and learning a lot more about how you do what you do.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Where can people find your work?
Look, I'm on Instagram. Obviously, I've got my 500px account has quite a lot of old stuff on there from the beginning. which if anyone's interested, it's quite interesting to look at the first kind of images. I was heavily into panoramics back in those days.
Sure.
Today, these days I'm not really, into the stitching and all that side of it. I keep it pretty simple. I'm getting into a bit of wildlife photography as well. As I said, I was just done Namibia, which was fabulous. There's my website as well, which is Timothy Poulton Photography. But they can also listen to my music as well on Spotify or Apple Music if they're interested.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, mate.
No worries.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at photography.com, along with prints and photography gear. I'm also on Vero, Photo, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because it really helps to get the podcast to be seen and heard. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.